It was well past midnight, and after hours of restless tossing and turning in bed, I finally rose to get some water. The living room lights were still on, indicating that night my brother Casey had asked Paul to stay with me for a while. Hearing about Paul's situation broke my heart. His wife had betrayed him, leaving his life in ruins. Paul had been married to the same woman for years, only to be blindsided in the worst possible way. Casey's son was also struggling, unable to cope. Casey had pleaded with me, saying he needed some peace. I didn't know Paul well, but I understood that his despair stemmed from a woman's betrayal. Our family had already endured so much loss. I had lost my husband, Jacob, 7 years ago. At 60, he died suddenly of a heart attack just as we were building our dream house. His death turned my life upside down, leaving me alone and carrying an emptiness for years. Recently, the loneliness had been intensifying. Tonight was one of those nights. Are you ready? Because this isn't just any story. It's about blurred lines, emotions spiraling out of control, and silent confessions waiting to emerge. Every moment might ignite something deep within you. Emotions you didn't know existed, pushing boundaries you never thought were there. If this is the story you've been waiting for, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Your support means the world to me. I slowly approached the living room. A few steps in, I saw Paul sitting there, watching a romantic movie on TV. My main concern was ensuring Paul found some peace during his stay, but little did I know life had other plans. Many things were already going wrong, and it would only take one step, just one, to change everything. Paul turned to me and asked, "Did I wake you up?" His voice carried a mix of uncertainty and a desperate need for peace. I stood there in my nightgown, feeling lonelier than ever. "No," I replied with a soft smile. "I just came to get some water." The truth was, I felt so alone at that moment. I didn't want the night to end just yet. Maybe spending time with Paul would make the night feel less empty. Perhaps watching a movie together could restore a sense of normalcy, making me believe that peace was still attainable. "Come sit," Paul said, gesturing to the empty spot on the couch. It wasn't a difficult decision. I wanted to stay, even if it was just for a bit of warmth and meaning. So, I sat beside him. The movie began, but I couldn't focus on the scenes. There was something inside me I couldn't quite understand. Paul's presence, the way this stranger sat so close, the slight nervousness in his voice. It all felt different. As the romantic scenes unfolded on the screen, I glanced away, remembering things I thought I'd forgotten. Accidentally, I turned my head slightly and brushed against Paul's arm. I quickly pulled back, apologizing. My eyes darted away in panic. "I didn't mean to." Paul remained silent for a moment before nodding and saying, "It's okay. Don't worry about it." In that instant, the space between us seemed to shrink. The movie continued, but nothing felt the same anymore. Neither Paul nor I could find true peace in that moment. Despite sitting so close, the emptiness inside each of us hindered us. I remember that night as the beginning of something more complicated than I had imagined. It was like a signal of impending change. The night took an unexpected turn. Sitting on the couch watching a romantic movie with Paul, I felt drawn to him, even in my nightgown. Sitting so close to another man after years of solitude, a tension built up that I couldn't ignore. Paul's presence wasn't comforting. It made me realize things. Perhaps it was because I'd been alone for so long, but being close to another man stirred something within me. It was confusing and strange, and I couldn't quite grasp it, but I was definitely feeling something for Paul. That night, it began to become clear. I didn't relax until the movie ended. When it did, I got up and went to my room, sitting on my bed for a while. I needed to think, but about what? I had no idea. Sleeping with all those swirling feelings wasn't like resetting. I tossed and turned all night, the lack of sleep dragging me into the morning. When the new day began, I decided to sit at the piano, hoping to shake off the unease inside me. I'd been alone for almost 7 years, and every morning I longed for a sense of normalcy. The piano felt like an old friend, offering a small piece of comfort and reminding me of Jacob. As my fingers danced across the keys, I hoped this morning would bring some relief. Then, I heard a sound outside. A shadow appeared at the window. It was Paul. out for an early morning walk around town. At first, I didn't notice him, but as the melody filled the air, he opened the front door and walked in. I kept playing, unaware he was there, until I suddenly saw him standing quietly, watching me. My fingers froze for a second, and that tension rushed back stronger than ever. But Paul simply smiled at me as if nothing was out of place. "That was beautiful," he said. "Thank you, honestly. That's the best birthday gift I've ever gotten." For a moment, I felt a rush of excitement as Paul walked in. It felt like the room shifted, as if we'd entered a different space entirely. Then he said something in a calm, genuine tone that I'd never heard before. "What I just said is true. Watching you for even just a few minutes was the best thing I've experienced in a long time. And did you know I turned 40 today?" It didn't take long to realize how much those words stirred something within me. I averted my eyes, trying to balance the swirling emotions with the sweetness of his compliment. For the first time in years, I didn't feel so alone, sensing that something was beginning to change. After the excitement of that morning, I looked forward to the evening. Learning it was Paul's 40th birthday made me want to do something special to make the day feel normal. An idea struck me, and I turned to him. "It's your birthday today," I said. "Well then, let's celebrate. How about we have some wine and cut a cake tonight?" Paul gave me a surprised smile. "Well, if you're suggesting it, I guess tonight might actually turn out to be fun," he said with a playful glint in his eyes. After a brief pause, he added with a teasing grin, "But there's a catch. You have to play the piano for me again." "No way," I laughed, trying to shake off some nervousness building inside me. "All right," I said, "but only if we open a good bottle of wine and make a proper toast." Even that small exchange left a deeper impression on me than I wanted to admit. I could feel the emotions bubbling up but pushed them aside, telling myself this was just about making things feel normal for one night. It was just a birthday, a little celebration, that's all. But then Paul said something so casual yet startling it threw me off. He looked at me with that same innocent expression and asked, "How old are you?" 45. I froze for a second. I'd always tried to feel younger than my age, but hearing such an honest compliment caught me off guard. "Oh, not quite," I said, brushing it off, though it was hard to hide the small spark of excitement his words gave me inside. I felt torn, pulled in two directions, lost between the warmth he showed me and the storm of emotions I was trying to control. By evening, Paul and I had opened our wine and settled in to celebrate. As we talked, we grew closer. His warmth, the way he paid attention, made me feel at ease. There was something between us, a pull growing stronger with each passing moment. Inside, a voice kept telling me to treat this like a normal, ordinary night. But then Paul raised his glass, smiled at me, and asked playfully but with lively eyes, "So, when are you going to play something for me? You know you can't get out of it." For a moment, I hesitated, then took a deep breath and said, "All right, let's do it." I sat at the piano, letting the melody flow again, hoping it would calm the storm inside me. With each note, I felt something shift, as if I was being drawn closer to him. Even as I got lost in the music, I found comfort in the way he listened, appreciating it like it was the most important thing in the world. What I thought would be a simple celebration turned into something entirely different. In that moment, it felt like a glimpse of something I hadn't felt in so long, something real. My vision blurred as my fingers glided over the keys, each note stirring something within me that I couldn't quite understand. Paul's voice echoed faintly in my mind, and it felt like my heart and head were slowly drifting apart. I was so lost in it all that I didn't even know when to stop. My hands instinctively searched for another melody when suddenly Paul appeared beside me. He placed his hands gently over mine. "You're an amazing woman," he said, his voice soft and a little shaky. "You play the piano so beautifully." His words echoed in my head, leaving a strange emptiness behind. His warm hands on mine grounded me, even as my emotions spiraled deeper. "Come on, you're tired," he said softly, his tone calm and reassuring. "Let's sit on the couch for a bit. I've got a surprise for you." With his gentle touch, Paul guided me to the couch. I still couldn't quite process what was happening, but something about the moment felt incredibly profound. As I sat down, my thoughts were still swirling. Then Paul walked back to the piano. I watched as his hands moved effortlessly over the keys, and suddenly he started playing my favorite melody. I recognized it instantly. It was the song I'd loved for years, the one that always stirred something deep inside me. As he played, my heart raced with every note, bringing back memories I wasn't ready to face. I just sat there, listening as the music filled the room and ignited something within me. After a while, I couldn't sit anymore. The melody he played pulled me up, almost like it was calling me. Slowly, I walked toward him, trying to calm the chaos in my chest. When I got close, standing right beside him, I didn't know what to do. "You're really good at this," I said, my voice trembling as I tried to hide how fast my heart was beating. "And you're playing my favorite song." My words hung in the air, echoing in the room as my emotions clashed within me. "Who are you, Paul?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "You're really getting to me. I've never felt like this before." I was completely overwhelmed, confused, excited, terrified, and happy all at once. Our eyes met, and we were so close I could feel his breath. Looking into his eyes felt like falling into another world. Time seemed to stop. The way he looked at me made my heart race and warmed me. In that moment, it felt like we were the only two people in the world. Everything made sense in a different way. My eyes locked onto his, and for a split second, nothing else mattered. All the confusion, fear, and racing thoughts disappeared, leaving only Paul and me. His hands rested lightly on my waist, firm enough to ground me but gentle enough not to push. My head was spinning, and I couldn't tell if it was the wine or the feelings rushing through me. Without Paul holding me steady, I wasn't sure I'd still be standing. The look in his eyes made me feel even closer to him. In that moment, his warmth and the sense of safety beside him gave me balance amidst all the chaos. "You need to rest," he said softly, guiding me toward the couch. His words were calming, and the feeling of his hands on my waist both comforted and unsettled me. When I sat down, his hands lingered there a moment longer, and our eyes locked again. I had no idea what to say or how to feel. The warmth of his touch made the night unforgettable, powerful in a way I couldn't quite explain. That night on the couch became one of the most thrilling and unforgettable nights of my life. Everything happened so quickly that I barely had time to process it all before morning came. When I opened my eyes, I got up and walked toward the living room. The smell of coffee wafted in from the kitchen, pulling me out of my half-asleep state. There he was, Paul, standing in the kitchen, shirtless and making coffee. His body was still warm and strong from the night before, on full display. I was thinking back to last night, feeling a strange sensation throughout my body. My nightgown and underwear were still scattered across the floor. Just the memory made me feel nervous yet excited at the same time. Replaying the night in my head only added to my confusion. What was going to happen now? How could I even begin to figure that out? But one thing was clear. We had a connection I'd never felt before. This night, this moment felt like the start of something that could change my life forever. Paul turned from the kitchen and looked at me, his eyes soft and his smile warm. There was a silence between us, thick with unspoken words. As I stood there watching him, I tried to understand what was happening and what I was feeling. Everything was such a mess, and I had no idea what to do next or how to move forward. It felt like I was completely lost in that moment, yet I could sense something shifting. I knew there was no stopping it. Standing there as Jessica, all I could feel was a mix of excitement and confusion swirling within me. Since last night, I hadn't been able to make sense of anything. Everything had happened so fast. My clothes were still on the floor, and as I glanced at them, I closed my eyes for a second, shaking my head slightly. Everything was so complicated. I couldn't tell what I was thinking, let alone what I was feeling. I quickly got up and headed for the bathroom. I needed a shower to clear my head, to step away from the whirlwind of emotions I was drowning in. My nightgown and underwear remained on the floor. I didn't care about the mess. All I wanted was to lose myself under the stream of hot water, to escape the chaos, even if just for a little while. After a while, I stepped out of the shower, wrapping myself in a towel. Suddenly, the door opened, and Paul was standing there. I froze for a moment. Neither of us moved. Our eyes met and locked in a gaze, so intense it felt like the world stopped spinning. I didn't know what to do. The confusion and emotion in my eyes must have been obvious because I felt completely exposed and vulnerable. Yet somehow I couldn't stop the words from rising to the surface, spilling out of me. "I don't even know what's going on," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "What we're doing. I know it's so wrong, but it feels like I'm dreaming." Paul took another step closer to me, his eyes filled with conflicting emotions. Neither of us knew what was going to happen. I wanted to say something in that moment, but the words just wouldn't come. "Your coffee's ready," Paul said, his voice a little shaky. As my eyes drifted to him, it hit me how messy yet strangely beautiful everything was. I didn't think about the future. I just lived in that moment. As I sat down with my coffee, the confusion in my heart was still swirling. Sitting with Paul, our eyes locked, remembering what happened between us. It had all happened so fast that I could barely keep up. What had we done? What did we feel? I wanted to say something to make sense of it all, but finding the right words felt impossible. "Jessica," Paul started, his voice strained. "What we did was so wrong. I know that. Why did we let this happen to us? I know that. Why did we?" His eyes showed guilt, but also understanding. He knew, just like I did, that things had spiraled out of control. "We should regret this, shouldn't we? We never should have done it." There was a pause. My thoughts were tangled, but finally, I found my voice. "Yeah, maybe it all happened so fast, but no, it wasn't right. We let things get too complicated, and now looking back, it just feels like none of it makes sense. This was a mistake for both of us." There was a weight on my chest, but also a strange relief in admitting that we'd both gone too far. Paul stayed quiet for a moment, staring at the floor. Then he looked up at me. "Let's pretend this never happened, Jessica," he said, his voice steady but soft. "I think for both our sakes, we need to leave this behind. What good could come from dragging this on, especially when things are already such a mess? We need space from each other." When he said that, something inside me resonated. He was right. Continuing this would only hurt both of us. "Yeah," I said, taking a deep breath. "Maybe this is for the best. If you leave, maybe that's the solution. It's probably the healthiest choice for both of us." Paul nodded, his expression firm. "I need to do this," he said. "It's the right thing for both of us." We sat in silence for a few seconds, just looking at each other. In that moment, we both realized how important this decision was. Accepting that what we had done in those dark moments was just a mistake. Facing that truth might be the first step towards setting things right. Instead of dragging each other down in such a tangled way, giving each other space felt like the only way forward. I hope you enjoyed my story. It's been an exciting journey, and sharing it with you has truly made me happy. If you'd like to hear more stories like this, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you'll be the first to know when a new episode drops. Your likes and comments mean the world to me. Hearing your thoughts and feelings really keeps me motivated. Your support helps me so much in creating more. Thank you all so much, and I'll see you in the next story.